afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this series again, Women in Finance and Entrepreneurship. We're in week 5, where we're just exploring the journeys of women in different industries. And one thing we've been seeing over the past weeks is that, in as much as the journeys of different women are particular to them, there's a lot of themes that are coming through. So it's as if they're laying out a blueprint for all of us to actually follow. And today we have phenomenal women joining us again. Thank you for joining us in different spaces, on social media spaces, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. We really appreciate you taking time out to actually come and explore this journey with us. My name is Tumelo Mahusi, and I'm the head of Internal Audit, Risk and Governance at Bahaga Group. At Bahaga, we believe in impact at all levels. We believe in big picture. So we want you to be part of this journey and collaborate with us as we impact the world and the next generation of leaders. And joining with me, I have a co-host who is a great leader, a great mentor, and a great woman, and all in all. Let me introduce her, Mathoholo Mogapi.
Hi, everybody. I'm not a new face here. My name is Mathoholo Mogapi. I'm the Managing Director of Bahaga Group. We're very excited to have you today, joining from different streams, different platforms. Today, again, we bring you two phenomenal women to come and share their stories, to come and share their journey, and give us insights to how they got to be where they are today, so that we can get inspirations, we can learn, and we can get advice to take forward in our different spaces and different journey. So today's topic, we're talking about breaking barriers, right? Strategies for women investors and entrepreneurship. This topic might seem like a specific, but it's really very open to anybody who's looking for inspiration, especially to just get a bit of insight into the finance world, into the investment world, because these two speakers represent that world. It is quite evident from the speakers that we've brought about that women are taking space. We are going into different areas, and we are having a voice and making space for ourselves and for those who come after us. That's the whole purpose of these sessions, right? To pull others as we go forward. As speakers today, we have Nangamso Mankai. Nangamso is a chartered accountant, seasoned chartered accountant with more than 16 years of experience managing corporate finance, private equity, and project finance transactions across South Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. He participates in industry bodies, South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, contributing there as a member of the Legal and Compliance Committee. She also sits on a number of boards. She has sat at Vision Group and at Tessera, and she's currently sitting as a non-executive director of Curo Holdings, and she's the chairperson of the Audit and Risk Committee for Curo Holdings as well. We also have Mamokete Lijane, spelled with an L, so I guess it's always confusing for a lot of people. Mamokete is a chartered financial analyst. I don't think we see many of those in our country, so we're quite honored to have somebody coming to share that journey, their journey in that profession with us. She is the global market strategist at Standard Bank Group, and has over 20 years experience as an analyst in financial markets. She has a wealth of experience, having worked at ABSA and at Aluwani Capital Partners as an investment strategist, and Suspense Securities and Nasus Capital as a fixed income analyst. She's also quite a columnist at Business Live. If you follow that paper, she writes frequently for Business Live, quite interesting insights on the macroeconomic factors, on South Africa's debt levels, on frequently as well on interest rates, and what's happening with the Reserve Bank's activities. Ladies, welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for this session. Thank you, Mamokete and Nangamso, for joining us today. Nangamso, let's start with you. That was quite a brief introduction, I guess, of who you are. Please, can you just share with us as to who Nangamso Mankai is?
Thanks, Nolo. So Nangamso, otherwise known as Nan. I am, as you said, a chartered accountant with extensive experience in the corporate finance and investment management, including private equity space. Yeah, that's just generally who I am. And I've had the opportunity, I guess, to sit on a number of boards and chair a number of board committees. And that's in a nutshell who I am.
Great. Thank you, Nan. The other thing, just to note from a personal journey, if somebody is looking for you on social media spaces, uh, you contribute quite actively within the Methodist Church. And in your profile, you have something that's quite interesting. You call yourself an aspirant Deborah. Can we talk
Yes.
about that inspiration for a minute?
So I think yes, I am an avid follower, if you can call it that. I'm a Christian, but I'm also an avid follower of the Methodist Church movement, and it really pins everything that I do. I give my all to God. I am centered by what God has called me to be, and where God wants me to be, and that is sort of my compass in every sphere that I occupy and in everything that I do.
Great. Thank you, Nan. Thank you for sharing. Mamokete Lijane. Can we get as to who Mamokete Lijane is? And I hope it's Lijane, not Lijane. Mamokete, the sound is not coming through. No, we're not picking up sound from Mamokete. Just give it a minute. Mm-mm. While we waiting to get Mamokete back online, perhaps let's check the headphones. Nen, can we just talk to a little bit of what private equity is? I know you spend quite a lot of time in private equity.
Still
So,
nothing.
okay,
Ah,
she's
there
back.
you go. There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, perfectly.
Okay, so I went off headphones and I'm just like now going to just dial in through, and I hope the computer audio is it works well. So
Amazing.
I was still saying, thanks very much for getting my name right. Not very many people get that right. So it's yeah, it's refreshing. So when you ask me who I am, so I'm a mother, first and foremost, as the one thing that is the center of my world and what I do. And I'm a daughter, and I'm a friend, I suppose. But over and above that, I'm me. It's taken me a long time to get to the point where there is a me here that is actually worth recognizing outside of all the things that I do, and that I keep myself busy with. So I'm a financial analyst. A lot of people ask me, what is it that you do? And I said, it's very difficult to say in a nutshell what my job entails. But by and large, my job is to make sense and communicate sense, make sense of what's happening in this very confusing, very active, very noisy world, and try and put those insights into thoughts that are usable so I can help other people make sense of what's happening, and then they can use that information to make the investment decisions in various different ways. So I'm what is called a strategist, across assets. So macro driven. So I basically look at economics and developments around that, and then use that to inform the decisions that we make as a bank, the decisions that the traders make on our desk, and the decisions that our clients make. So it's a very short summary, but I hope that suffices.
Great. Yeah, no, as we were looking in and preparing for the session as well, we quite had a hard time. We had to watch a number of videos and read your columns to just get what is a global strategist in investment means. So thank you for sharing that. Then the question was, you spend a lot of time in private equity. Can you maybe just say inside what does that mean? What is private equity and what does that environment mean? But of interest, I guess, because it is Women's Month, what does the industry look like in terms of women representation as well?
Okay. So in effect, private equity is the use of private capital. So investors that would invest in their whether it's through companies that would invest in private companies. So as opposed to companies listed on the JSE, these are companies that are unlisted companies. And what private equity seeks to do is to provide capital to those unlisted companies that are either looking for, either it could be capital for growth, or it could be to buy out existing shareholders out of the business. So that's in effect, or in a summarized form, what really private equity is. But however, I must emphasize that it's not just putting down cash, but what those private equity investors would look to do is provide some sort of strategic support and value add support that would allow the business to have some accretive growth over the period in which the private equity investors are invested. So the thing about private equity investors is generally they would have a set time limit in terms of how long they can be invested in a business. So some might be 5 years, some might be 7 years, but they would put down capital with the hope of getting the business to grow or achieve its growth strategy plans, and then would look to exit and sell their positions in those particular businesses. So I think in terms of women, the industry I haven't been involved directly in private equity for a while now, but the industry has really struggled with women representation at all levels in terms of professionals and in terms of senior professionals coming into the market and staying in the market. But also I think and it's not unique to private equity, it is one of the challenges that we find in terms of the ability to source businesses that are well established, that are women owned. I must also emphasize, so one of the challenges that we've seen is that there's what's called venture capital, which are businesses that are perhaps earlier stage and not well established, versus, call it, the traditional private equity businesses, which are businesses that have a track record, that are well established, that are positive in terms of their performance. So you have to look at those two in parallel and understand that the principles that apply to venture capital, which is fairly new businesses and concepts and ideas that are not well established and sometimes have not even matured in terms of their entry to market, is a very different principle that you would apply to businesses that have been operating for 10, 15 years and are either looking to grow or pivot in terms of where they're going.
Great. I think you mentioned something that maybe to get clarity from you. You mentioned just like the women participation. You mentioned the skill is not as great as well when you're looking in terms of the investee side as well. So we're not seeing a lot of women businesses getting funding or accessing funds within either the private equity industry.
Mm. So I think it's, and that's why I'm saying it's not something unique to private equity. So let me start by saying that there are numerous businesses across South Africa that are owned and well-established businesses, well-running businesses that are well-established by and run by women. But for some reason, I guess it's been difficult for the industry to find those businesses, nurture those businesses, and grow those businesses. I'm not sure what the challenges are. I mean, I have my own views. but I'm not sure what the challenges are. But that's one of the focus. But there are funds that have been very intentional about looking for women-owned businesses. So it's a gap that the market identifies as being left wanting, and there are funds that are specifically have a greater focus on looking for those businesses in the market.
Great, Mamokete. For thank you so much for that insight. I guess I want to put the question to you. Sorry, thank you, Nangamso. I want to put the question to you, Mamokete, on just representation within the finance space in which you operate. Because you sit in executive sort of suites, you sit and have conversations with very management level, with higher management levels. When you walk into those spaces, are you seeing more people that look like you?
Well, I've been in the business a long time, right? So if I think back on when I started, the answer has to categorically be yes. When I started 20 years ago, I remember going to a work networking thing, and I went to the first group of people, and they were talking about wine. So now I grew up in Lesotho, guys. Like, there's no wine there. People just drink beer. That's just how we roll, right? And then everyone's like, oh, there was this vintage, and then there was this, and then there was this wine farm. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? Move on to the next group, and they were talking about golf. And I don't like sports. I'm like, and I have no intention of ever golfing. And I'm thinking, this is death. Move on to the next group, and they're talking about fishing.
Sure.
At this point, I'm just like, this is never going to work, right? It's like, there's just nothing here for me. I was short, I was black, I was a girl, and then these are like all these tall white men golfing, fishing, drinking wine. And I was just like, and I said to my boss at the time, I was like, I'm never going to fit in here. There's nobody here who shares anything of my history. Nothing. And immediately, it strikes you that, this is not you. This is not your place. It's not your home. You can come and do stuff here, but it can never be home. And you'd go to like industry functions, you walk into a room, you're the short person, and there are all these tall Afrikaans men talking above you because you're short, right? So they can actually have conversations here. And you're just like this little miniature person, and you're like, hi. And you're hoping that, somebody will hear your squeaky voice. There was language issues because people speak Afrikaans. I don't speak any Afrikaans whatsoever. Never had an interest in learning. And, over time, that has been diluted without a doubt. Like over time, people, you got more Black people, you got more women. So yeah, it looks better, but it's not like you walk in and you feel immediately comfortable because, you stretch your career, you move beyond certain boundaries, and, there's ceilings, and, so it's changed, and it's changed for the better. I've been in environments where I've just thought, this is what it should look like. This is transformation in action. You've got young Black kids that are just amazing professionals, very special people. And then you walk into another room and you're like, what the hell is going on here? Where's everybody? So, I suppose that's my way of saying, it's not where we want it to be. But I think we have seen quite a lot of movement in the right direction.
Amazing.
So that's really amazing. I'm happy to hear about that. At least I would feature in the wine group, so I wouldn't necessarily be I can't do golf and fishing, but wine, I'm sure I can figure my way out of it. Just one thing, right? To you, Nangamso. So, one of the worries that we have is just where are women in terms of investment? What are there particular industries that they're most likely to invest in? And normally what informs the decision for them to invest? So where are women? What are those industries that are women friendly that we'd want to be part of?
Thanks, Dumelo. I think just maybe before I answer your question, to add to Mamokete's point, The refreshing thing is women are taking up the spaces themselves. So women are creating those platforms for networking that make it comfortable for themselves. I always say, as women, as an example, I can't go and sit and go hunting for a weekend. I've got family responsibilities and a whole lot of other things. That's just the reality of my life.
Yeah.
So what I love about the transformation we're seeing is that women are taking up the spaces to find networking platforms that work for them. So we can do
Yeah.
3 to 5. I can't do 3 to 9. Unfortunately, I need to supervise homework and whatever else I need to do. So I think, to your point, I love that question, because I think the immediate inclination is to think that there are certain sectors that women invest in. Women are everywhere. Women are everywhere. Women are in mining. Women are in engineering. Women are in tech businesses. Women are everywhere. And so there isn't a specific sector to then say that this is where women should and are participating in. Women are, we're breaking glass ceilings, we're kicking down doors, and we are well capacitated and coming into our own and realizing that if my skill or if my interest or whatever the case is in robotics, that's where I'm going to participate in. So what I love about what we're seeing is women are everywhere. So I was having a conversation with somebody else, and we had a huge argument because they seem to feel that women should be in the hospitality kind of businesses.
Yeah.
Women are everywhere. We are changing the dynamics. We are moving in line with where the economy and the world is moving. We are in the tech businesses, we're in the IT businesses, we're doing everything that we're allowed to do. So there isn't a particular sector that I can kind of say that women are in. But I do think, obviously there are barriers, various barriers that are placed upon ourselves in terms of us getting to grow those businesses. But women are forging forward, hey? Women are unapologetic and going to get what is theirs.
Just maybe as a follow-up, and I like that fact, because we need to actually create space for women across the board. But do we still have, as a follow-up to that, sectors that actually, like you spoke to, barriers that exist in terms of women in spaces? So where are those industries? Where are we seeing a lot of barriers where women cannot actually enter through easily as compared to other industries? So where are we seeing the barriers from an investment point of view?
So I think with my experience, I've been lucky that I've worked across different industries. So having been working in companies that are quite sector agnostic. And I kid you not, and maybe I'm reiterating myself, we've looked at businesses that are in the mining services space. There are women businesses there. We've looked at businesses that are in high-tech businesses. There are women businesses there. We've looked at businesses that are in, call it your traditional sectors. There are women businesses there. So I think, I guess, one of the challenges, to Mamokete's earlier point, is around, I guess, having access to the sources of capital is one of them. And that's from a variety of reasons. But also one of the challenges that I've seen in some of, particularly the earlier stage businesses, is kind of having access to markets that allow the business model to thrive and flourish. But in terms of call it intellectual or any other restrictions, there are no restrictions. Women are doing operating in the exact same spaces that men are operating in. But obviously, I guess, and it speaks to what Mamokete was saying earlier as well, I guess we need to also just find a way to be able to support each other and share the knowledge that we have, so that if Tumelo has done very well in her robotics business and been able to secure funding, how do we use that knowledge that she's gained and shared to share it with the, because a lot of the fundamental issues are really about sharing knowledge and knowing how to pass through the hoops, for the lack of a better word, and ensuring that your investment thesis is seen through. And I think that's where, I guess, perhaps we have, as women, not done as well as our male counterparts, is then to share the knowledge, to say, listen, I've raised 300 million rand for my business, and this is how I went about it. This is how, this is how the knowledge can be transferred to the next woman business.
Thank you so much. That's quite enlightening. I think to all the viewers out there, if you want to comment, please use your comment section. We have a platform where you can comment, and ask direct questions we can be able to ask to our guests later on. Just maybe to follow up on that, Mamokete. So from just a macroeconomic level, is a woman's voice heard? What is the participation of women at the macroeconomic level?
Yeah, so then it gets a bit more complicated. I mean, I think, a lot of the conversations that we have about women participation, especially in dialogue, and dialogue is it's so important. I mean, I'm a practitioner in dialogue, and this is kind of like where I've gone over time. And the dialogue and the debate, because that informs the frameworks that we then use to make big decisions. And there's a lot of things that we take as given. We take as given, and you walk into a room and there's a lot of assumptions, and that's what culture is. And I think that's why it's so important to have diversity, because culture is informed by where people come from, and it's informed by our what do you call, like our assumptions, the assumptions that everybody brings into a room. And so you have a conversation, but that conversation is already, before everybody opens their mouth, already there's a lot of assumptions that underpin that dialogue, and therefore already inform, the set of choices that those people that are having the dialogue are going to walk away with. So who you are and your experiences and your challenges and how you see life and how you see humanity is really, really, really important. So when you have a dialogue that is driven by the male experience and the male gaze, or a white experience, or a suburban versus a rural experience versus private school versus a public school, we all know that those things can be, we can come from very different worlds. But now when women are not part of, and their experiences are not in the room, so there's a lot of assumptions that then get made, and a lot of decisions that then get made that appear to be the perfect solution. So those people are not sitting there trying to screw you. They just only representative of whoever is in the room, and then they'll make decisions that make sense for that cohort, but it doesn't make sense for everybody. So if everybody is not in the room, it's a problem. And I suppose I mean that's a way of introducing this idea that women have got to be very much part of the conversations, and they aren't, not to the extent that they should be. So last year, I mean, I did the exercise of, looking at women on Women's Day, and I went back and I was like, what is Women's Day about? It was this day where these women went marching, and it was about passes. And I'm like, and then I went digging a little bit, and I found there was actually a manifesto that these women had around what are the things that they want to have put forward. And within that manifesto, front and center was childcare, right? It's like, we need childcare. I was like, okay, yes, of course. And they're like, no, and we need education, right? These are not, they're not, for women, they're not the first, they're not secondary considerations to higher GDP. They are the consideration, they're front and center. So the issue of what is it that gets prioritized, so we can all agree that these things are important. But when you come into a room, it's about allocating scarce resources, be they money, time, human resources, etc. So that nuance around what is it that gets prioritized, it really is going to depend very much on who's in the room, right? So, I think for me, there isn't enough participation of women in debates of national importance, and therefore we keep getting subpar results in some ways. And you see this even I think like the test case that everybody talks about is around the management of COVID, where you had health, economics, freedoms, and all of these things that had to be kind of like weighed off against each other. And women evidently made very different decisions. Like, you know, in places where women were leaders, you had different decisions, not in absolute in terms of what was decided, but in terms of nuance. And people, like communities, societies, were much happier where there were women leaders, like New Zealand, etc., than they were in the US, like where there were male leaders busy lobbying, like facts against each other. And it was just around communication and nuance and saying, how do you prioritize this? How do you communicate, and all of those other things. So I definitely think we are underrepresented, and I think it does cost us. It does cost us because you look at South African outcomes, fundamentally the failures are failure to consider the human first. You can talk about GDP and all of these things, and like all our debates are totally dominated by things like, is ESCOM working? Is Transnet working? We don't talk enough about how the kids, are the kids all right? The kids are not all right. And if the kids aren't all right, we're never going to be all right.
Nobody's right. I so much like that. I like that. And one thing that we spoke to at the beginning, it's just your participation and the dialogue thing for me is quite big. But maybe from your journey, how did you get to a point of saying, now I want to write? Because we see you speaking to interest rates, any platform, there's a lot that you're actually writing. And I believe that we need to get to a point where we actually write our stories and have opinions, be part of the dialogue. How did you get there to just deciding that now I want to be there and put my story out there and have an opinion and just make sure that I'm heard and forcing myself into spaces?
I get told the story. Nan and Nolo went to varsity with me. Actually, we did our MBA together. So they'll tell you I've never had an opinion that I didn't think needed to be shared. It's just not it's just my makeup. And I think that's the things. I think it's my nature. They tell a story that when I was 5, I had a birthday party at home, and then everyone was like, "Oh, everyone's having a party," and everyone's like, and then I stood on the table and I'm like, "Hey, shut up! The person whose party this is now, it's my turn to talk." So I think it's just a nature thing, right? So it's not something that had me having to pull myself away from myself, but I also think, my early career was really like I've constantly been in this world where my job was to analyze and communicate and defend, and so it's kind of like by happenstance I ended up in a role where it really was about me having to firstly have an opinion, inform that opinion, and defend that opinion. So that's really like the way I've been trained, but I think fundamentally it's just who I am. Like, and the thing about it is, you look around you and you look at things and you're like, but this is nonsense, right? And my mother's like, well, if you think it's nonsense, then say it. It's like, why don't you write that it's nonsense? And then you're a bit scared and you're like, what's the worst that can happen? I'm not gonna die, and I'm out there. Maybe I'm wrong. So what? Then it's a debate. Then maybe I put it out there. Somebody else will show me that no, I'm wrong. And then then I'll be wrong, but I'll know better. So I think there's also that drive to constantly, be brave. And for me, it's like every single day, I'm like, okay, how are we gonna be brave today? And then that's the only way, right, to approach life with bravery. It's not a lack of fear. It's just like saying, is this life threatening? No. If no one's dying, it's all good.
I like that. Oh, yeah. I think it was beginning of last year, and I needed to just call myself to be bold, and it's exactly that. So I put it as part of my profile there, as my bio, to just a constant reminder to just be bold. Because honestly, I think all of us just need a little bit of bravery, courage to step up and do what needs to be done, or touch new pathways as well.
Sorry, Nolo. I think to what Mamokete is saying, I can attest to her sharing her opinions, whether you want to hear them or not. She leaves that to you. But I think, to something Mamokete that has just said, I think one of the problems I have struggled with in my career is the imposter syndrome.
Oh, yes.
So you're equally qualified as your male counterparts. You have the same experience, and someone says to you, you are too much, or you're too loud, or you're too this, you're too this, and you suddenly kind of move back into your shell. And I love what Mamokete is saying. It's, and I'm gonna take it going forward to say, is anyone gonna die? No, let's move on. Because I think one of the things that holds us back, particularly in the spaces that we operate in, where we haven't, I guess, made as much progress as our male counterparts, is the imposter syndrome. So you sit around the table, they're all talking nonsense, and they're talking nonsense, but you feel like, maybe I should just be grateful to be sitting around this table, or whatever the case is. I'm not as confident as the next person. And that's the one thing that I think, as I have learned over my career, is to then say, I mean, look, you can't fight every battle, right? You need to choose your battles. But it's just then to just move away from that imposter syndrome, and be comfortable with the fact that you deserve a seat at the table. Whether you're younger than everyone else, you're blacker than everyone else, you're more female than everyone else, whatever it is, you deserve a seat at the table.
Wow, I was actually just wanting to talk to that seat at the table, and I'm surprised that you say that from now on you're gonna take the be bold and forward, because you do have a seat on on the table. You've had opportunity to sit on boards, and you're currently sitting on a board, but you also chairperson of the audit and risk committee, where you are taking leadership, I guess, from that point of view. Can we then talk to a bit of that in terms of the courage that needed and the inspirations for that as well? Just sitting on governance role, and what does it mean? So what are you trying to do with the role going forward as well?
So I think it's a couple of things. The first one is, I mean, you've been given a seat at the table, so you must take full advantage of the seat. If it means, I mean, we all know our weaknesses and our strengths, and sometimes we're not willing to admit them to other people, but you can admit them to yourself. So, as an example, if I'm going for a board meeting where there is something very complex on options or whatever, I'll call the people in my circle that are more well versed in that and say, "Hey, I've read this, I don't understand it." So, one of the things I am grateful for is that I'm not afraid to ask for help. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
But also, when you sit at that table, you make sure that the seat is, you take the seat fully and properly, and you're well prepared and well prepared for the topic. You'll never be an expert in everything, so just cut that out. That's never going to happen. But you're well prepared for the meeting that you're going to, and what also helps is, before, for example, for me with board meetings, chatting to the management team before I get there, so that if I've got any clarity seeking questions, my head space is kind of in the right space. But also is, it's, I'm an only child, and so is Mamokete, which is probably a problem. Um, so you learn, as only children, you learn to be confident very early on in life, because you don't have a big sister to fight any of your battles. But jokes aside, you really need, there's a saying, I can't remember where it said, if you can't believe in yourself, how do you expect other people to believe in yourself? So if you walk in like head down, and you are, already feeling sorry for yourself, how do you expect to? And you need to be confident. You've done the research, you've researched, you've well prepared for the meeting. You need to be confident. And there are times, particularly, and not in any of my current boards, but I mean, I sat on my first board when I was 29 or 30 years old. And sometimes people will throw the line at you of, "Oh, you're my daughter's age," and you're like, "Okay, weird." And I mean, it does break you down a little bit, but you then have to be very comfortable in what you're bringing to the table. You can't be apologetic. You can't be sitting at that table and be apologetic. And so, extremely grateful for what you have. You bring your all to the table. You deliver what you need to, and and all goes well. So I think for me, that's what's helped. You need to be confident. You need to be well prepared. You need to be well read. You need to be, like I say, you won't be an expert. You won't be an expert in every sector that you're involved in, but you need to be well prepared, so that at least and you also need to be honest. If you don't know something, please don't BS and say try and make up an. You don't know if someone's thrown a curveball, but there's also the benefit of sitting with different people around the table. They'll challenge your thinking in different ways. But then you also, there's times where you have to say, oh no, I didn't think of it that way, and actually I don't have an answer, and you have to be comfortable with that. But the first thing for me is they speak of emotional intelligence with some of these things that you're placed on as the first this and the first that and the first that. Emotional intelligence is key because there are just challenges that are going to come that are not technical related, that are not related to any particular subject matter, that are just, as Mamokete said earlier, people tell the story from their vantage point. Some of these things that you engage have nothing to do with what the work at hand. It's just people's views on life, and you have to have the emotional intelligence to be able to sift through that.
Sure. That's amazing. One of the points you mentioned was asking for help, and I think that's so pointed because when as you grow in your career, you also get to a point where it seems like it's weird to be asking for help or to be asking for questions to others. And I like that you need to be totally honest and open and ask for help. Um, Mamokete, so you spent some time in fixed income, as an analyst. From a macro point of view, South Africa has very high debt levels now, and COVID did nothing for us as a country. Can we maybe explain to the men in the street as to why they need to worry about South Africa's debt levels?
Yeah, so it's a simple question, but it's also a complicated one. So I think firstly, let's think about why South Africa's debt levels are where they are. And the simple answer is that South Africa's debt levels are where they are because South Africa doesn't grow. So on a net basis, what tends to happen is you have economic activity. We all go buy stuff. When we buy stuff, we pay tax, and then we pay tax. That tax gets used to pay for government services. When the economy is not growing, we buy less stuff. Government gets less tax, and because government gets less tax, a lot of the expenditure that they do is now financed via borrowing because the revenues aren't there. So a lot of the reason why we are where we are is because, from a debt perspective, is because we have a growth problem. And I think we all know about load shedding. So if I say, well, we've had load shedding for the better part of a decade, it already explains to you what is happening. So the fact that people aren't working, we know unemployment is through the roof. We know we have family members that are not working, even if we're lucky ourselves to be working. Some of us would like to be working, but we're not. We've seen companies close down. I'm sure, if Nan had to go through just the number of companies that are there, even for the capital that is available in the private equity space or any other space, there just aren't enough companies because there's just not enough economic activity. And as a consequence, unemployment is high, tax revenues are low, and government expenditure has to still meet the needs of people. Plus, you then have to support people via grants, and it creates this mismatch between expenditure and revenues, and that big gap is now called a deficit, which is then funded via borrowing. So I suppose, it's a very long way of saying, when you're thinking about South Africa's debt levels and you're thinking about how we deal with them going forward, at a minimum, we need to have a better functioning economy. And at a minimum, to get there, we need to have reliable electricity. We all know, every time you go to the mall, half the shops are closed down. People are losing their jobs. Their companies are closing. We've all experienced this. You guys offer services to companies. I'm sure you see this. The companies that you service as well. So it's not the debt level issue is not a standalone issue. It's a symptom that is, of a much bigger malaise, so to speak. So, are debt levels too high? Yes, they are. But the debt levels aren't high. Growth is low. That's really what is going on.
Yeah.
So how do we think about going forward? The problem with it is that at some point your debt levels themselves become a problem, and we there, and that's why I'm trying. I want to delink this thing when people say debt levels too high. No, growth is too low. So and if growth stays the way it is, the debt issue is not going anywhere. In fact, it's only going to get worse. In fact, it's only going to become much more of a problem. For growth for us to deal with. What happens to countries that have got higher debt levels, though, like that are out of control, is something that we need to worry about a lot. Because it just means that the currency is going to continue to be under pressure, inflation remains high, growth remains low, and at worst, you have a debt crisis. But even in those countries, debt crises are not debt crises; they're crises of policy elsewhere. And I think when you as a South African are thinking about are debt levels too high? That is, it's not an issue. The issue is your crime levels are too high. You don't have enough electricity, and as a consequence, you've got a brewing economic crisis that, if you don't handle all these other downstream issues, will eventually manifest. So, how do we think about this from a personal perspective? We all citizens. And, countries with high debt levels, when you have a debt crisis, you normally have a socioeconomic crisis that follows on that, So it's not a good scene. It's not a good scene. Whether we come back from this? Of course, you can always do things better. Because the reason we're here is not because we couldn't have done things better. We could have done a lot of things better. The debate around electricity is going, like inclusive growth. It's one that is ongoing. So there are all those things. So when you, as a voter, as a citizen, as an employee, as a friend, because I'm going to call us out here and say, I have a problem with some of us who have friends that are involved in less than ethical economic behavior around entrepreneurship, and businesses that run businesses that are not ethical, that do things that are very selfish. You need to understand what the consequences of that are. So, when you're drinking that verve, and you are at that fancy place and you're taking that beautiful picture and you're posting it on Instagram, we all get to pay for that. So I think as individuals, we need to be more civic minded in how we interact with our politics, within our communities, within our businesses, and start being pro South Africa. And how you vote, the questions that you ask, the things that you valorize, the things that you think are cool, you need to think really hard about whether that is aligned, it's pro-social, and it's actually beneficial for your country. Because that's where the questions actually are now. This is a country debate, because otherwise you will end up with a failed country. And economic failure is terrible for everyone. I don't know. It's a very, very unfocused way of answering the question, but I think the question is bigger than that.
No, I love how you broke it down, and it was quite informative and educational at the same time, because normally you wanna have, or rather, in my economic classes, I remember it was we separated sort of monetary policy from fiscal policy. This one has to make this decision, but at the end of the day, there is a lot of integrations, and one's decision can impact this as well. Because we're talking to now where the Reserve Bank has to make questions around interest rates to control inflation, but we're also watching what's happening with the currency. But there's then this bigger question of the economy and its performance as well, and decisions being made that are impacting what's going on the monetary side of things. So I appreciate you so much for Nangamso. So we actually watched a bit of a clip where you actually also brought in the question of the state of capture, not necessarily the state of capture, but the corruption question, because I mean it is impacting all of us, like Mamokete mentioned. And also the thing is it's not isolated, because it's at this influx of private sector and government as well. What is your opinion, I guess, on some of the insights Mom's get shared, and the things that we need to be looking at, just around corruption and participation by private sector in this as well?
So I think, I mean, I fully agree with Mamokete. I strongly believe that you can't blame one side for corruption and not the other. It takes both two to tango. So you can't have corruption in the state without the private sector trying to get, in there. But I think what I loved, and we had a very lengthy debate with a few friends a while ago about this, that the crux of our challenge as South Africans is really an individual challenge. Before we can want to go and tackle, big conglomerates and departments and all of that, is your stance as an individual to corruption. So if you are okay with the fact that you win an audit because you've had to do things, I mean, it starts there, right? So
Yeah.
no one decides to go and steal 500 million. It starts there to then say, oh, I don't think I really qualify, but I think I should get this tender, right? And what does that do? Then it creates a circle, because then the people who qualify feel that they should pay because they feel they're more qualified, and it just becomes a huge Pandora's box. So I fully agree with Mamokete to say at the crux of it, if we really want to come against some of the challenges we have, these are individual decisions that we need to make and individual reflections that we need to make. Like I say, there is for every person who receives a bribe, there's someone who's willing to pay a bribe. So
Yeah.
you can't blame the one and not the other, you know. And so I fully agree with Mamokiti to then say at the crux of it, as individuals, we really need to look and see where we stand in terms of that.
Wow. Great. Thank you, Nen, for that insight. The question of just investment, right? Um, so a lot of women are paving the way and gaining financially as well. So I want to ask, if you are a women investors, what should they be looking at before making an investment? What are the things that they should be considering then before making investments?
So I think there's a few basics. It's obviously the financial performance of the entity you're looking at and whether it's able to generate the returns that you're looking for. But what I've loved more and seen more over quite a long period of time is now the focus on what we call the impact of those investments. So where the financial returns are being, weighed against the social returns. So are we creating employment? Is this opportunity creating employment? Is it allowing women to enter, the fold? And is it allowing women empowerment? Is it allowing us to do things beyond just the financial returns that generate social returns? Look, social returns are a bit difficult to measure because obviously, you can measure how many jobs you've created, but whether that's been impactful or not impactful, it's a different thing. But I think what I love is that the investment world is now starting to look at things with a more social lens, to Mamokite's earlier point, to say before you worry about the numbers, look at the
Yeah.
people. I think so. I think one of the key things would obviously, like as I said, is the financial performance of the business and the growth prospects of the business, and how you can then add value to the business. I think a lot of industries are seeing that technology is not the enemy, but technology can be used to leverage the growth trajectory of the business. And a lot of businesses are starting to see how they can use technology to be more effective and efficient in the processes and procedures that they do. So I think those are for me, as I say, the financial returns. You know what yield you're trying to get. You obviously, if you're investing in a private business, you would be looking to get more than you would in a, you know, in a bank account, in a bank account interest rate. And that's the first thing. But also the focus should also be to Mamokete's point on the social stuff. And interestingly enough, I won't mention the lecturer, but both Nolo and Mamokete might remember the lecturer who then said, when you then create wealth for the select few, remember that it's unsustainable, because at some stage, those who don't have are going to start looking and saying, how do we get access to that wealth in whatever shape or form that they have? So the social part is not a nice to have. It's a more a sustainability and ensuring longevity of the earnings that you have in that business.
So I like that. So on the other end as well, because I think what you're sharing as to the lens as an investor, then me coming in as an entrepreneur or somebody or as a business looking for funding. So I have to be then looking at those other elements. Or is there anything else that on the other side we should be preparing and putting together to gain access to the funding?
So I think one of the things is to ensure that your business model is sustainable. So if you are, for example, running a business with one customer that is, I'll use my hometown so that I don't offend anyone, that is in the middle of Kokstad, and Kokstad is not growing, so your business is actually limited. That doesn't really build for a compelling case. So you need to make sure that the product or the service or the business that you're offering has sustainability, and as I said, has growth prospects. Because if you're asking me, maybe your business has grown over the last 5 years. You're asking me to put in money over the business on the premise that the business will grow over the next 5 years. You need to be able to demonstrate that. And that's sometimes one of the problems that we have. And also, I think we also have to be, some of the challenges we've seen is we also just focus on, I don't want to call them low hanging fruit, but focus on the ones that you can control. We'd all love to have businesses that are listed in the New York Stock Exchange. We would all love to have that. But that's a 10, 15 year down the line. But you can't be selling me a current premise of the fact of that potentially, maybe, perhaps one day, this business can be there. Work with what you have. Look at the growth prospects of what you have. Ensure that you've got a route to market that's sustainable. Ensure that you've got a product, even if there are competitors that would come in. Maybe in some industries, the barriers of entry are low, but ensure that your product, there's something that gives it additional competitive advantage that makes your customer or whoever you're selling the business or service to, make them want to come to you rather to the next person. That's the fundamentals of building a solid business. And then like ensuring that you've sussed out and you fully understand where the growth is going to go. Because there's also nothing more disheartening than providing funding to a business only to find that actually what they thought, or where they thought there's a market, there actually isn't a market. And those are some of the things that we would look at under due diligence to then say, do we believe that the growth story you're selling is actually achievable and sustainable?
Great. Mamokete, just before Tumelo comes in, you of course you shared a bit on what's happening in the macro. My question is, so how does business South Africa respond to everything that's happening at that high level? I know, I mean, businesses, especially the load shedding, they've tried to work around and find alternative energies, and we that is quite a big topic now in South Africa. But do you have any insights as to how we should be responding to a lot of the sort of activities happening now?
So, I mean, I'd like to, this is one of those things I speak a lot to like big business in South Africa. And I want to say upfront, and I think this is something that we need to, if I leave people with one thing, when we talk about business, we need to differentiate between big business and everyone else. When we talk about business, we always want to talk about Sasol, Standard Bank, ABSA, AB InBev, that's who we call business. And they are business and they are important. Love them to the moon and back. But remember that the guy that's running a spaza shop in the auction is also a business.
Yeah.
So when people talk about business, I get really annoyed with the big focus on big business, because I think when we do that, there's a lot that gets lost in the winds. So in terms of like big business, we know what they're doing. We know that they, the first thing is they can lobby, and they can lobby hard, and get policies changed, and change and invest to try and work around the dysfunctions that we have. So as Transnet can't run trains, big businesses like taking over lines, and securing those lines, securing them against cable theft, etc., where policing has failed. So they are kind of like privatizing, or at least partially privatizing or providing services for themselves where government is failing in order to, to keep functioning. And they'll get that stuff right, and it's great that they can do that. And what it does do, I think, as a key takeaway is, it makes business harder to do for big business. It increases the cost of doing business. It means that there's less investment, etc. And it does mean things will run, but it's very difficult for them to grow. So you might still see activity, etc., and all of those things, because they'll put solar farms, they will do whatever it is that they need to do, and they can put the money in place and get the returns that they need in order for them to function. But they won't grow as much as they otherwise would have. So that would be my kind of key takeaway. And you see that happening across multiple spheres, right? On security, on infrastructure, on water, on electricity. They're doing all of those kinds of things. So, and it's not home free. And, the fact that they're doing that is not something I think that we should be saying, yay, guys, you're like fantastic, whatever. No, they need to do that. And they've done the calculations. Believe me, the math makes sense. And if there's a price issue around that, and you've seen that with retailers, all they'll do is take the cost that they've put of all the things that they spend money on, and they'll pass it on to the consumer. So the math makes sense for them. But let's talk about this middle-sized businesses. Let's talk about the small mom and pop shop. And I think those businesses have really struggled to try and insulate themselves against the broader failures, whether it be electricity. And I've seen that. Like, I live in Rosebank, I work in Rosebank, I go to Sandton. There's load shedding, no load shedding, I don't know. I live my life. And the other day I went out to the West Rand to go and do something, and there was load shedding, and then the shopping centers closed down. I couldn't withdraw money because there was no power. They don't have backup power. So suddenly I'm like in Sandton, where I don't experience load shedding because Rosebank Mall, Sandton City, even the filling stations. The filling stations, they make a plan. There's load shedding, they've got generators, they've got backup power. Everybody's got backup power in my world. I didn't have to move far to get to a place where there was no backup power. So if you didn't have power for 4 hours, there was no power for 4 hours. That meant the businesses that operate in those malls cannot operate. You can't withdraw money. The filling stations closed down. And I was like, oh my gosh, so these people actually have load shedding. And I mean, suddenly it brought to my mind that this big business can insulate themselves. The run-of-the-mill guys can't. You go to like a Kronstadt, there's no water. And the premier there, they've made a plan, they supply their own water. The smaller, medium-sized businesses can't do the same. So I think, we talk about business investing in where government doesn't, but they're not really cushioning. They might cushion themselves, but they're not cushioning everybody else against that. And I think you cannot actually express how damaging these state failures have been for small businesses in South Africa. So you start to talk about unemployment that is extremely high outside of, like, say, Gauteng, and you just don't see how you can get over that. And I keep saying this, but the kids aren't all right. The bulk of South Africa is not all right. And even though big business can do the bits that it can, but it doesn't do it for everyone. It does it for itself. and it's not enough, and it will not be enough. So getting state functionality up and running is not something we can outsource to business, unfortunately. The state does need to be functional. Municipalities do have to be functional for South Africa to function.
Sure. So I think one of the things, and I think we all have mentioned it at different spaces, right? That policy is quite key. How policy is developed. I mean, it sets the tone to everything that we're doing. What are the gaps that we've been seeing? Maybe we can start with you, Nangamso. Just tell us from a gaps point of view. What are the gaps? What can we do to ensure that we actually have policies that are inclusive, that ensure that women's needs are prioritized? So let's speak to those gaps and let's reflect back as a country and say, have we done enough, or where can we go better to ensure that women agenda is pushed forward?
Can I maybe, before I answer the question, Tumelo, ask you? So when policies come out for public comment, do you give feedback?
Fortunately, this is the
So
first
when-
time I actually have
So
been.
when Saika says, and I can speak to the two of you. So when Saika says there's a new policy, they're asking for public comments. We need public comments from members. Do you give inputs?
That's something that we struggle with because so Tumelona's kind of working with Business Council trying to respond to the procurement one, and I work a lot with IRBA, Independent Regulatory Board of Auditors, as a member of the Committee for Auditing Standards, and my problem is people don't respond. Exposure
you,
drafts are
Nonku.
sent out, people don't respond. Oh,
Thank you. So as Mamokete said earlier, the people whose voice will be heard are the people who are going to tell the stories from their perspective. So if we're having these issues as women, whether it's a new a bill that's going to Parliament on business matters, whether it's a bill that's going to Parliament on gender-based violence matters, if we are silent, who is giving the input into that? So I think to your point, Tumelo, we're not doing enough, myself included. And we're not doing enough. And there's those ones that will pick and pick and say, oh, this interests me. But until the issues, because as Mamokete said, I go back to the point she made earlier, is people will look and give inputs from their vantage points. They don't know what it's being like, what it is like to be a small business, woman-owned business in the middle of a rural town. They don't. And until those women give their inputs in, it's all going to be research and all going to be desktop research based on and also including the views of those who've given inputs. So I think for me, we're not doing enough. We're not doing enough as individuals. There are bodies, and women bodies that will give inputs into these policy documents. But the rest of us, are our views being represented? And my answer is, I just think it's a no.
I like that because you're making it very simplistic, because we're always thinking that government is the one that sets the policy, yet we're not participating at all. And I think just to your point, even if the draft bill is out there and it is opened up to say comment, it's as if we don't know that we actually have the right to comment. We have a right to actually put our voice out there and just speak to issues. And I mean, participation comes from, you have to be reminded 100 times that actually this is out. And like you're saying, it's only on interest. If procurement speaks to me, I'm going to look at procurement. But there's a women issue as well. Is that are we not speaking to that? So there's a lot that we're not actually speaking to. We're choosing focus and we're silent in most of the cases because we're hoping that somebody else is going to say it and we're not actually owning the story. Just maybe Mamokete, to add to that, well, what is your view from a policy point of view? Where are the gaps and are we doing enough?
I don't think anybody, any country in the world, any body politic, any society can ever say they're doing enough. And I think, I'm not saying this is an out for South Africans, but I think it's important to understand that the job is never done, right? So there is no utopia, and it's not going to happen in our lifetime. It's human nature that there's no utopia because the world is forever changing. So we're definitely not doing enough. So, you understand that in the broader context, that it's not possible to do enough. So then let's say Are we doing what we can? And what are the things that we can do? And I always think about this in, there's this concept that we learned about binding constraints, that, in any system, there's always a binding constraint. When you finish doing that, there's be another one. Then you figure out what that one is. You sort that out. Another one crops up, because that systems are unstable, and you've got like these equilibrium that are propping up all the time. So I think for me, the better question is, what should we be doing right now? What is the most immediate thing that we should be addressing? When we finish addressing that, we'll do the next thing, and then there'll be another a next thing, etc. And I think, when you think about this, as you think about South Africa, you need to think about South Africa as like as a system, and you say, what is the thing that is holding us back, that if we change right now is going to deliver the most multipliers right now? Right? And it remains front and center. So, and I think there's a lot that's been done. There was like a lot of inertia around addressing that issue for the past 10 years. And it feels like there is more movement now. And that makes me glad. It makes me glad, because if we go into next year and I don't have load shedding, already there's a whole lot that I don't have to worry about. Then the next one that we need to think about, and it's really about what is it that affects everyday people, right? There's the short term and the longer term kind of like binding constraints. So the power one is one. The issue around transport and logistics is one. It's too expensive to move things around South Africa, and it's too expensive, and it's not efficient. Then, so that's like pure Transnet, etc. But I think another really, 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 really important issue that needs to be addressed from a policy perspective is around security. It's not okay that like none of us can walk down the road with a cell phone in your hand. In fact, I don't think any of us can walk down the road at all. I personally have stopped walking. You are feeling unsafe. Our infrastructure is being stripped. You can't get anywhere until that kind of sorted out. The fact that the level of cable theft that we have, the amount of like organized crime that we have, and it has a massive and material economic cost. Besides the fact that it makes us all anxious and we lose our minds a little bit, but we also can't run our infrastructure. So for me, the issue of electricity and security is like super key that it gets sorted out. So, and the thing about this, the policy debates also, and I mean it goes on to the next, the longer term one that is closest to my heart, is you need to resolve the education impasse. It's ridiculous. We cannot be having these outcomes, and with these outcomes, we're not going to have a future. Like I said, if the kids aren't all right, we aren't all right. So that, to me, is a longer term binding constraint that we need to address, right? But I think that there's this. We have a lot of debates about policy. We say, oh, what should the policy be? But in fact, there's a lot of this that's not about policy. It's about implementation. We need to start talking about why we're not implementing the policies that we do have. I think on security, I know for a fact that nobody thinks it's okay that we have like, massive amounts of theft. So theft is not a policy issue. Like from a policy perspective, we understand that shouldn't be happening. But the question is, what is happening around, enforcement, around how you hire, around, and maybe that's like now the mini policies when you start to deal with a matter. And it's like, where are we failing? Why is policing so bad? Why is it that we don't have proper intelligence? Is that a policy issue, or is it just about execution? And where's the holdup? It's obvious that these things should be happening. So why are they not happening? So it's not, is it a policy issue? When you talk about education, for instance, why is it that teachers simply can't teach? Is that something that you need to address? It's maybe about like putting policies in place to make sure that teachers can teach and you hold them to account. But where's the holdup? Is the holdup policy in the way that we understand it? So where's the holdup? And I think there's a lot of what we then call political economy questions. It's around
Mm.
governance.
Yeah.
And Nan will tell you, you guys are all CAs. You can have a King 5, King 7, whatever. If the culture is not about enforcement, you will sit there with your policies and you will still have people running rampant doing whatever it is that they do. So the question is, where's the holdup? And I think the holdup, talk a lot about, oh, it's policy. No, it's a lot of the time the holdup is not policy. We need to ask ourselves questions around why are these things happening, and then it's not about being policy prescriptive. It's about like what is the kind of civic engagement that you have in the society. How are how's power devolved? How do you destabilize? How do you destabilize that? Why do councils and municipalities behave the way they do relative to the municipal, the professional class in municipalities? Why is it that you can have a cleaner tell your municipal manager what to do? What informs
Sure.
that? So these are the things that I think are a little bit more, and it's asking a lot from South Africans, and it's asking a lot of us as individuals, but it really has to be resolved there. There, what is it that we talk about at our brides? What do we talk about in our families? What is the centering and organizing principle around our ethics? What do we ask of the people that provide us services, that sit next to us, that are in church with us? What are we asking individually, interpersonally? And I think that's why it's so very complicated.
Sure, because it boils down to the individual, and I think most of the time we try to make it as it's big and complex, but it actually boils down to us. What are we doing on a daily basis to actually get us to where we need to be? But ladies, maybe let's be more futuristic now and just speak to what are we seeing? What's coming up in the next 5 to 10 years? Well, how is the industry changing? And what are the key things that are coming up? Maybe from you, Nangamso, just take us through that. What are we seeing in the investment industry? What are the changes?
So a couple of changes. The first one is a more focused or a bigger focus on impact and what the investment or businesses are doing in terms of impact. And that's a range. The second one is I won't mention all of our ages, but I can kind of guess all of our ages. But the tech space is revolutionizing businesses. If your business is not finding ways to use tech, I'm not saying we must all have tech businesses, but if you're not finding ways to use tech to improve the effectiveness of your businesses, you're probably going to be left behind. The third one is, as to Mamokete's point, there's a lot of challenges in the South African economy, but there are actually opportunities. So you speak of the logistics and transport, deficiencies in the country. There are actually opportunities even for the greater continent. It's time businesses are looking beyond just the borders of SA for two reasons.
Yeah.
There's only so much growth you can get here, but there's untapped opportunity in the rest, either of the continent or even the world. Some businesses are expanding beyond the borders. And realizing that we are a part of a global community and not an island. And so is influencing the strategies that businesses are implementing. But I also think that to Mamokete's point just now, businesses are also looking and seeing where is government failing? And how do we then as a business step into the gap? I mean, we started with the electricity challenges, but businesses are looking at, you've got, for example, now government is unable to meet the demands of students in terms of accommodation. Student housing is becoming, so businesses are now looking at gaps to say, where is it? Instead of standing on rooftops and shouting that government's not doing enough, where are the opportunities for us as business where government is failing for us to then implement? So those are the trends I'm seeing going forward. Tech is a huge thing. I recently went on a side visit at one of the schools or higher education institutions in South Africa, private higher education institutions in South Africa. And first of all, I didn't know what they were talking about. I was completely lost at all the jargon and the language that we're using. But tech is really being used to boost businesses to move to the next stage. So that's really what I'm seeing. The old adage of you've got a business and it's been traditional, and for the longest while, people have moved beyond that, and COVID-19 has taught us that we can actually learn to do things slightly differently. So businesses are really moving in trying to be more accessible to a wider range of people. And the last one for me, as I said, on impact, don't underestimate the township or rural economy. I recently attended a presentation by a gentleman who studies this economy. There's so much untapped potential. I mean, he gave a presentation on women abathengisa amagwinya on, I think, one of the streets in Joburg. When he shared how much profit and margin they make, I almost fell off my chair. I'm like, from Fed Cook. So don't underestimate that. So also businesses are looking at non-conventional markets, because some markets, people are not looking to go to a Santon city. People are looking to find the same things they need and their luxuries they need in the environments in which they're. So, so that's where really business is growing. It's thinking out of the box. The way it's been done for the last 30 years has worked and brilliant, but it's not what's going to sustain business forward.
So amazing. And maybe Mamokete, just to share as well, be futuristic with us, but maybe more to your personal story. How do you see it changing? How do you see it evolving? What's up for the next 5 to 10 years? How is it looking like?
My personal story, you're asking me to forecast. Oh my word. I've never ever I was never one of those 5-year plan people. Never yeah, so I've never had a 5-year plan, and I still don't have a 5-year plan. And for me, my life has been like an adventure. It's kind of like I like where I am. And I don't know what I'm going to do. I know what I'm going to do next because I know what decision I'm making now. I'm not 100% sure where it's going to land me. But as long as it doesn't take me back, I'm fine. And so, in terms of my 5-year plan, I've got kids that I need to get through high school. Those are always at the top of my 5-year plan. And I always say, as long as those people, that's my minimum. The rest of it can be anything really, but it has to be a lot more explorative. What I want to do a little bit more of. So like I said, I come from Lesotho. I've spent the last 20 years professionally involved in South Africa. That has involved moving away from looking at financial markets purely and looking a lot more at policy, being a lot more involved in policy dialogue. And that's been the big transformation, I think, of the past 5 years. And it's been amazing. And I've loved that. And it has made my career worthwhile. Prior to that, I was thinking, I don't know why I'm doing this. All the times I trade this and I want to make money. And I'm like, my life cannot possibly be only about making money. And it was always like, how do I make my life meaningful, not to other people, but to me? How do I say, I have this many years on this planet. I have this many years that I'm spending working. How do I make it matter? How do I live a life where I make an impact? Surely I'm not gonna just die and on my thing it's like, oh, she made money. It can't possibly be. And that's been a big part of the big transformation. And I didn't plan it. I didn't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to do these things so that I can get to here. I knew my life had to have purpose. And then I started taking on projects that gave my life purpose over and above what I was doing. And what you then do is you get the bits you like, you test them out a little bit, and then once it feels like, yeah, this is gonna work, you let go a little bit of the bits that are taking a bit more time, and then incrementally your life moves more towards something that makes sense to you. So that's kind of like been my approach. So what I would like to do more of, so I can only tell you what I'd like to see more of in my life. How it's gonna play out, I don't know. So, you know, I want to do a lot more work on the continent. And it really is about like market development, you know, incorporating. I always say my passion lies there where financial markets and public policy meet, because I think you know, financial markets have a big impact on what happens on public policy and vice versa. So it's a really nice place to work where I'm not just a financial markets person, but I'm a public policy person, and I'd like to expand that a little bit more. I mean, consolidate what I'm doing already in South Africa and expand that a little bit more, you know, on the continent and especially regionally. And I'd like to do a lot more work in Lesotho. Don't know what that looks like, but I want to go back home. Not 100%, but in a way where I've got a material presence there, professionally, but also physically as well. If the one thing I learned from COVID is that, you know what, I'm not a Joburg person. I don't have family here. I don't have people here. I love it, but it's not home. And it's important to try and expand that a little bit more. So that's kind of like where I'm at. Get the kids out of my house. Firstly, secondly, go back home.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's really insightful, and thank you for sharing so much of you. And just Nangamso, what 5 years, 10 years? What does it look like for the aspirant Deborah? What does it look
For the
like?
aspirant.
Yeah.
So I think Mamokete spoke to something that I sometimes wish I'd learned earlier, but I guess it's part of the growth journey. Finding things that are aligned to your purpose and being true to your purpose. And for me, the last year particularly has involved me I don't want to say removing myself from spaces because it sounds a bit aggressive, but removing myself from things that I thought were aligned to my purpose, but were actually not, if that makes any sense. So
Yeah.
for me, the next 5 years is I enjoy the investment management space. It's what I really love to do. But I really also, as I mentioned earlier, I am more passionate about making an impact. And maybe it's not to 10,000 women or whatever, but it's to a few women that can then realize whatever potential lies inside of them. I'm from 3 hours from where Mamokete is from, but I'm from this side of the border.
Of the border.
And you go to rural areas and you really see how disenfranchised women they are. You know, they really believe that what they've been handed is all that they can ever do. And one, having been exposed to, I guess, some of the places that they've been exposed to, I would love to do something that would just empower women, just mentally. As I said, I think I said it earlier, for me, emotional intelligence has probably gotten me through the most difficult times in my career. And just believing that what you want to achieve is actually, you're justified in wanting to achieve it and wanting to do it. So for me, that is really my drive, while still staying in some shape or form in the investment space. That's really what I want to do. But I also want to be, as I would say, I want to also be the kick-ass person in the boardroom, because every now and again you do need the unapologetic Black girl to sit around the table and say, I'm here, I've earned my place here, and I'm here to add value. So that's me.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nan, for sharing. I like what you both are saying on purpose. It always comes back to purpose. Just before we getting to a close, but I wanted to ask this question from I think both of you have somehow answered it as well. And it's just from, if there's anything, I guess, that you want to bring awareness to, if there's any initiative that you want to bring awareness on, you please share, Mamokete.
like, I mean, I know you sent me that question. I was like looking at it thinking, I don't really have one. I don't really have one because, my interests lie really, really, really in public policy. And there's a lot of work that various people are doing in that space. And I mean, for me, if I had to ask people, like, just align a little bit more with like what I would like, what I think is important, is really to look for those conversations, look for those dialogues, look for them in your own environment, and educate yourself. And it's a permanently and whatever it is that's your interest, don't worry about somebody else's interest. I might be on about macroeconomic policy and this, that, and the other, and you might be more about education. And there's tons of work that people are doing in that space, and it's all out there, and it's all free, guys, because the internet has been our friend, eh? You don't even have to research, just Google, and there's so much that people have put out there that speaks to your particular passion, whether it's small business, but be more involved, inform yourself on the bits of public policy that matter to you. And engage in the conversations, whether it be about security. And I also think it's important that we all get to a point where you're not just saying, oh, this is something that somebody was saying at a bar. You don't actually have to like be saying, yeah, my uncle so and so said XYZ. There's research out there. It's free, it's everywhere, and there's a lot of really good people that are doing really good work, so that you can actually go read for yourself and inform yourself, so that you have an informed opinion, because it's your informed opinion that is going to it's going to drive better dialogue. So we need to up the level of our conversation everywhere.
Yeah.
So find your thing, do your little 5 minutes of research, and dig deep, and then you can become a force in and of yourself, because you've got everything you need to be important. We're already fully formed. We're perfect. We already it. You don't have to be anything other than what you already are. You just need to find ways of using who you are to feed the thing that matters to you.
We fully formed. We are fully formed. Then, any initiative that you would like to share or bring awareness on, and also maybe just some codes or advice that you would like to leave our guests with.
So I think I also was like, as Mamokete said, I was like, sure, the pressure to find initiatives. But I think for me, the circles we are in need to be more about empowering each other, and the conversations that we have. And you can decide which circles those are. I think that's the first one. The second one, read. As I say, there are times when it's not your intellect that's challenged, but your emotional or emotional intelligence that's challenged. So you need to be able to stand on that, and be able to and be able to stand on your own and be comfortable in who you are, in your skin, in doing those things, and the things that interest you. Read, be an active citizen and an active participant. And lastly, I say, so for me, I'm a big mental health person. If the space I'm in doesn't serve my mental health, I'm out, because the damage is far more than anything that else. And if I have to leave, as Nolo said in my intro, if I have to leave a quote, I would leave the ladies with Matthew 5, verse 14 in the Bible, that says, "You are the light of the world. Dear women, you are the light of the world." God did not create women for us to be hidden, to be shy, to be timid. God created us to be change agents in the world. That when Mamokete up on a podium, the whole world sits up and stands up. But it's also not for her own benefit and glory, but it's for the glory, for the light shines on all of those that are standing around her. And that's
Sure.
really what we are being called to do in the spaces that
Mm.
we occupy, the corporate spaces, in the family spaces, in the government spaces, in the policy making spaces. When Mamoketi's light shines, please know
Mm.
that she's also shining on those that are standing around her. So I think that is what I would say, and encourage the conversations. Like I say, so Tumela, I'm with you on the wine club. Mamukiti wouldn't have participated, you and I would have been there. But even in those wine club conversations, have
Yes.
conversations that are building. You know,
Mm.
a friend's partner once said, if the circle you're in, if when you're in trouble or when you need help, the circle you're in can't help you, then you've got the wrong circle completely.
Sure.
Can I just also just say, what Nan says is so important. I think we the one thing I've realized is that we are our biggest enemies. The person you need to, the in all the fights that you're going to have, the most important fight you're going to have is with yourself. And as women and as Black women, we come from families, we come from backgrounds, we come from communities, we come from, partnerships and friendships that, in one shape or form, are forever telling us you're too much. You're a lot. You are noisy. You are loud. You're just a lot. You are a lot. And that it comes from when you are small. It's in a school. It's in preschool. It's everywhere. And that voice that is in your head, and it's not a simple thing. You need to love yourself. People say love yourself. It sounds so easy. It's hard. So you need to do a lot of work on yourself to try and have a better relationship with yourself, to try and heal a lot of your traumas. A lot of us have got various types of trauma that influence how we relate, not with the world, but with ourselves. Because
Oh,
once you've sorted that little girl and she knows that she's worthy, she's important, and all of this, no one can stop you. And my quote, I mean, the quote that I always go forth with, and and it stays with me. It's like Maya Angelou's, where she says, "You've been paid for." So you don't stand as one woman, but 1,000 that came before you. You are your
yes.
ancestors.
Yes.
And they went through the most, guys. We cannot squander their sacrifice.
Mm. Sure.
For me, I look at it and I'm like, those women, through everything, even though they traumatized me, I need to heal from them. But you know what? I am their sacrifice. And it was not a
Sure.
small sacrifice. So I'm like, I am the result of the people who came before me. They deserve more, and I deserve more. So, and I fight with myself, firstly, to say, you know what, you need to calm down and you need to understand that you are worthy, you are loved, and you are
Sure.
important.
Amazing.
Oh my word.
Emotional.
That was so, yeah, that was so powerful. And it's just, wow. Thank you so much, ladies. Be like, you are fully formed. Be the light. You are worthy. You are loved. Eh? Fight with yourself first, and begin the journey
Sure.
to healing yourself and healing that little girl. And remember that you don't stand alone. There's legions and legions of women who came before you, who prayed for you, and who sacrifice so much of themselves so that you can be in this place today. We've learned so much from you, both of you ladies. Thank you for sharing of yourself. Thank you for sharing your journey with us. Thank you for joining us as Bahaka in inspiring the next generation of women. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Lekamoso. Oh my God. And to everybody who's joining us, I hope you got from this conversation as much as we did. We were inspired. Have, we are taking so much. We're taking so much. Thank you for joining us today. And hopefully will join us next week on our last session, the 29th of August. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, ladies.